Okay, this is going to be our last chapter, our last video for The Great Gatsby, Chapter 9. Question number 1. What four adjectives does Nick use to describe the newspaper reports of Gatsby's and Wilson's deaths? Discuss each of those choices in diction. He says they were grotesque, circumstantial, eager, and untrue. The word grotesque connotates a level of disgust, and that is truly how Nick feels about these reports. He's disgusted by what people have to say about Gatsby's death. Circumstantial means clouded by suspicion. There is a lot of suspicious circumstances surrounding his death. No one really knows what happens, and this is much like his life. There were a lot of circumstantial things. His life was clouded by suspicion and mystery as well. Eager, quick to judge, report without all of the information. So the reporters were very eager to kind of put the story out there without all of the facts. And this was much like his life as well. Just like the people at his parties were eager and quick to judge him and spread rumors about him. Untrue. No one actually ever knew the truth about his life or his death, except for Nick. So everything that these reports were saying were not actually the truth about how he died. The irony in Gatsby's death is actually all of those things that we just talked about, that it was so similar to his life. But here's where it's quite different. When he was alive, everyone came to his house, but none came to his house in death. So he was almost a celebrity while he was alive, but no one mourned for him. No one bothered to show up for him for his death. You could hear a pin drop at his funeral. His house was totally empty. Not a soul showed up. And one of the quotes here by Nick, he says, "I began to have a feeling of defiance, of scornful solidarity between Gatsby and me against them all." Number 3, analyze the dialogue between Nick and Klipspringer. What do we learn about Klipspringer, and in what way is Klipspringer a larger symbol? Klipspringer is such a minor character, but he really represents so much more. So we learned that Klipspringer was a real freeloader. They called him the boarder, which meant that he had like room and board at Gatsby's house. He basically lived there. He was there all of the time. He was at every party. He stayed there for days, sometimes weeks on end. He seemed like he was probably a good friend of Gatsby's because he basically lived with him, but we actually find out that he never cared about Gatsby. He was never a friend to Gatsby. He was basically taking advantage of his generosity and his hospitality, and nothing more than that. He was there for the party. And Klipspringer is a larger symbol for all of the people who came to Gatsby's parties. They came and they took, and they gave nothing in return. There is no respect for him, no friendship for him. Aside from Nick and Gatsby's father, Owl Eyes is the only other guest at the funeral. Why should this not be surprising to the reader? And think about the library scene in chapter 3. Owl Eyes, remember, he was also a symbol as well. He was able to see the truth about Gatsby. He was looking around in his library and he could not believe that the books were real. He acknowledged that Gatsby was a real person with a substance. He wasn't just fake. The books weren't just fake books in his library. They were real. They were full of words and feelings and emotions. So he realized that Gatsby was a man full of dreams and complex emotions. Why do you think the author made the decision to have Gatsby's father call his son Jimmy? He says, "Where have they got Jimmy?" when he finally shows up to Gatsby's house where the funeral is taking place. So Jimmy is a nickname for James. It's more affectionate and casual than James, which is, of course, his real name. His real name is not Jay, it's James Gats, and his father called him Jimmy. So this reminds the reader that he's somebody's son. He was not just this mystery person who floated out of thin air, but he is a real person and a different person than he presented himself to be. He presented himself to be Jay Gatsby, but in actuality, he was James Gats. He was Jimmy Gats. He was somebody's son, and it really captures his real roots. Somebody who was new money would probably call their son James, James. Somebody who is a little bit more down to earth would probably call their son James, Jimmy. Explain the significance of geography in The Great Gatsby. So we have the difference between the Midwest and the East if you're looking at the actual country of the United States. And then we have the difference between East and West egg. So East and West egg, we've been talking about the difference between those two, are vastly different from each other. East is more sophisticated, classy, and superior to West egg. In terms of the larger country, though, the people from the Midwest were considered much more moral and upright. The East Coast, specifically including New York, which is the setting of the novel, was fast and loose and riotous during the Roaring Twenties. So all of the characters, actually, with the exception of Gatsby, were from the Midwest. They were born and bred with morals, class, sophistication, and of course money. And then they were all kind of thrown into this crazy scene of New York on the East Coast, and they don't really know how to behave or conduct themselves. The East Coast sort of like corrupts them, so to speak. And of course, Gatsby was from the North, so he was from neither of those places. He was from the North, and it says Minnesota there, but he was actually from North Dakota. What does Nick learn about Jordan near the close of the novel, and what does this say about their relationship? Well, she tells him on the phone, "I'm engaged." Wow, she moved on pretty quickly. So that shows us that she was never really serious about her relationship with Nick. There were never really any real feelings involved. It was, at least for her, a relationship of circumstances and convenience. And it probably was for Nick too. They were spending the whole summer hanging out with Daisy and Tom, and the two of them were just kind of like thrown together. And Jordan rather, makes sure that Nick knows, "I never really cared about you. You didn't break my heart when you dumped me." She wants Nick to know that. And the last question here, explain what Nick means by his closing statement. This last line of The Great Gatsby. "So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past." Our past and our histories define us. Gatsby's past and who he was as a young boy made him the man he became. We can beat against that current of where we're from and try hard to get away from where we're from and from our pasts, but the past will always remain a profound part of who we are. No matter how hard Gatsby tried, no matter how much money he made, no matter how elaborate of a party he would throw, he will never be old money. He's always going to be James Gatz from North Dakota. He's not going to fit in with the elite old money people. And that past is what shaped him to become the Great Gatsby, but also kind of hindered him from ever becoming the man that he truly wanted to be. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the Great Gatsby.